This is a CBS News special report. Verdict in Atlanta. Here is CBS News correspondent Dan Rather.
Good evening. The verdict tonight, guilty. And to the end, Wayne Williams said he did not do it, did not kill any of 28 young Atlantans. But the jury found otherwise, that he did kill at least two of them, Jimmy Ray Payne and Nathaniel Cater, the two he was formally charged with killing. The sentence imposed immediately, 2 consecutive life terms. Parole, technically possible after serving 14 years. For now, it's the end of a chilling chapter that Americans came to know as the Atlanta murders, a chapter that had begun quietly in July of 1979. There were few headlines then. Some said it was because, sadly, so many children turn up missing for so many reasons. Others said it was because the victims were poor and black. Either way, 14-year-old Edward Smith and 13-year-old Alfred Evans were the first known victims, both found dead July 28, 1979. More victims would follow over the next 22 months. Slowly, the realization and the headlines. Someone was killing the black children of Atlanta. Someone with more street savvy than the street-smart victims. That someone, said the prosecution, was 23-year-old Wayne B. Williams, himself a black man. And tonight, a jury of 8 blacks and 4 whites agreed. Bruce Hall is in Atlanta.
It was late afternoon when the jury sent out a note from the courtroom to Judge Clarence Cooper, saying they had reached a verdict in one case, but not in the other. Judge Cooper told them they must have verdicts in both cases. 2 hours later, they did, and the call went out to enter the courtroom. Judge Cooper told foreperson Sandra Laney to give the verdict to District Attorney Louis Slayton, who walked to the podium and in a quiet, monotone voice read, "We, the jury, find the defendant Wayne Williams guilty on count 1, the killing of Nathaniel Cater. Count 2, guilty of the killing of Jimmy Ray Payne." There was no reaction from Wayne Williams. Judge Cooper called the 23-year-old music promoter and his father to the podium. They were surrounded by deputies. The elder Williams, barely able to control his rage, told the court, "I don't see how anybody, anywhere, could find my son guilty. I think that it's very unfair." Judge Cooper asked Wayne Williams if he had anything to say before he passed sentence. Williams once again said he was innocent. Judge Cooper then sentenced him to 2 consecutive life terms in prison. Under tight security, Wayne Williams was whisked away from the courthouse and driven to the Fulton County Jail. Williams, looking very depressed, was surrounded by deputies. Williams will remain in this jail until after the appeals are filed. The prosecuting team was elated with the verdict, saying they were confident all along that Williams was their man.
All of this time we were working on the case, we were trying to exclude Wayne Williams. We could not exclude Wayne Williams. We kept getting evidence that included Wayne Williams.
I think that it's probably the greatest fiber case ever tried, and it's probably going to advance scientific evidence in criminal trials in America more so than any case in this century.
Defense attorney Alvin Binder conceded the fibers were a key element.
I think the fiber evidence was the hardest evidence to overcome.
Do you think that his performance on the second day under cross-examination by Jack Mallard hurt him at all?
Well, the press seemed to think so. If he'd have been white, it wouldn't have hurt him.
Was race an issue?
It was there.
What was it about the testimony that you think was the most compelling?
Quite frankly, I don't know. I think it's not, I don't think it was in the court. I don't think it was in the court. I think it was the things that preceded the trial. The pressure. It's very difficult to make a decision in a situation where there have been so many deaths.
The jurors said it was a hard 9 weeks, not only on them, but also on the law enforcement officials.
You guys were super to us. We thank you a lot here. is as tough for these people as it was for us.
How do you feel?
I'm tired.
How tough was it?
Tough.
Do you feel confident with the decision you made?
Exactly.
At the Williams home, the elder Mr. Williams was still angry.
Political pressure.
From whom?
From whom? From the federal government.
To do what?
To arrest Wayne.
Because why?
Because they wanted to cover up for the city of Atlanta, for the missing murdered children. They want this a cover-up. It's a scapegoat. They've used him as a scapegoat.
Police sources tonight say there are plans to bring additional charges against Williams. So in the event the verdict is overturned on appeal, they will be able to keep him in jail. There is concern that if he were to be released and allowed back on the streets of Atlanta, he might be killed. And there is now the perception in Atlanta tonight that Wayne Williams is definitely the child killer that terrorized the city for 2 years. This is Bruce Hall.
From the day he became a suspect through the trial that made him a defendant, we saw him mainly in brief glimpses and mostly through the eyes and testimony of others. Wayne B. Williams, in his early 20s, affable, placid, and pleasant, said some. A child-corrupting Jekyll and Hyde, suggested others. A media man by trade, a dabbler in radio and television and musical talent promotion. A financial master of none of those trades. The mystery of Wayne Williams was not solved when he took the witness stand. There was the polite Wayne Williams, who said he killed no one. Then there was the furious Wayne Williams, who called his prosecutors fools, who, he said, failed to prove their case. David Culhane takes a look now at Wayne Williams.
There are a lot of things that went on that I feel you people in the public should know. They said something was dropped in the river, and let me say this now. I told them that I dropped nothing in the river. They said that. I didn't.
It is the voice of Wayne Williams before he was arrested last spring.
It just looks like to me you may have just a bunch of murders out here. I did not do it.
It is the same voice that the jury listened to for 3 days at the end of his trial. Was he a psychopathic murderer or simply an eccentric young man caught up in the urgent effort to halt an epidemic of killing? According to Professor Abraham Ordover of Emory University in Atlanta, the testimony of Wayne Williams was crucial to the jury's decision. Professor Ordover is an expert on trial law. At the request of CBS News, he analyzed Wayne Williams' appearance in court and the tactics of the prosecution and defense lawyers. Professor Ordover said that the lack of direct evidence, fingerprints, or witnesses made the work of the jury much tougher.
It's enormously difficult. There are very few cases like this, a handful in the last 50 or 75 years have been tried where we've had nothing but circumstantial evidence. There's usually some direct evidence in a case and a host of circumstantial evidence.
And Professor Ordover thinks that the appearance of Williams on the witness stand was the decisive factor in the trial.
When the defendant comes on, here is a person they can turn all of their attention to. They are there, that jury is there to decide the credibility of witnesses, and this is the most important witness in the trial.
He was composed and sat with his fingers laced in his lap. He spoke in a soft voice. Williams, I would characterize myself as a carefree, happy-go-lucky person. Nothing ever really bothered me.
I saw a Wayne Williams who was a likable young man from a decent family with a rather normal childhood, not without a sense of humor.
Humor like this. Defense attorney Alvin Binder. Now you sure haven't been losing no weight. Has the food been all right for you? Williams with a smile. I'm under oath. As to the prosecution's theory concerning his motives, Williams answered like this. Binder, do you harbor any feeling in your heart toward members of your race or anybody? Williams, I don't have any grudge against nobody. Binder, look at the jury and you tell me whether or not you are a homosexual or have any sexual hang-ups. Williams, there ain't no way I'm no homosexual. No.
I sat across from him. I don't ever remember him turning toward the jury during the 3 days of testimony. That's startling, to say the least. It doesn't establish a rapport with those 12 people who are going to decide his fate.
On the third day of his testimony, Williams seemed to lose his composure.
Right from the beginning, it was almost shocking. Before he even said a word, you looked at the demeanor of that man on the stand, and he had sagged. Without a question being asked, this man was sullen, unhappy, tired, and angry.
Now, I've been through a lot, and I'm tired, and I'm trying to do the best I can to answer this question. He keeps asking the same thing. The question is, did I kill anybody? And I done told this man I haven't. And a few moments later, Prosecutor Jack Mallard, I'm asking you if you were programmed. Williams, no. You want the real Wayne Williams, you got him right here. And the jury decided that the real Wayne Williams was guilty.
They saw a man who was painting himself as a perfectionist, who was perfect and who was making it. But the man answering the questions was a man revealed to be flawed in terrible ways, and who could not come to grips with that. Why would he lie again and again and again and again under oath in a situation where his life might be at stake?
After the verdict, Wayne Williams said this, I maintained my innocence all along, and I still do so today. I have no malice against prosecutors or jurors. I just hope the person or persons who did it would say so. Thank you. And then he was taken away. This is David Culhane.
There was never a smoking gun, no Perry Mason confrontation, no bombshell forcing acquittal. The evidence was circumstantial, and the prosecution brought Wayne Williams to trial for 2 of the 28 killings. During the trial, evidence was introduced suggesting Williams' involvement in 10 more of the slayings, but the trial came and went with no evidence about the other young people slain. Some of their relatives attended the trial, but had no opportunity for a day in court. Sam Ford has their story.
13-year-old Timothy Hill's body was found on March 30th, 1981. Although he was one of the 28 Atlanta murder victims, he was not among those linked to Wayne Williams in the trial, so his is one of the unmentioned murders.
I think they don't forget it. They don't forget Timmy case, because they don't say nothing about it. And I think Tim case is, you know, he just struck.
Public Safety Commissioner Lee Brown says his task force is still in existence, still investigating. But in January, he told the court the staff had dropped from 100 at its peak and that only 10 investigators were still working on the remaining cases.
My information is that they're downgrading the task force to the extent there's only a few people still assigned to the investigation of the remaining cases. The information I also received is that they will phase it out within the next couple of months.
Like our children deserve a right to be investigated to the fullest to find out who's killed them, or someone to come forward with some information.
They're going to drop it after this?
It's already dropped. Yeah, half of us haven't even seen the investigators on our kids' case in 5 to 6 months.
In some cases, the children were missing more than a year before police or the citizen teams who searched these woods every weekend discovered victims in secluded spots. And often the only remains were a few bones or weather-worn bits of clothing.
But you've got to realize that some of these cases will never be tried. A conviction would not be obtained on some of the cases due to the condition of the bodies.
And in suburban DeKalb County, where 5 victims were found, Public Safety Director Dixon Hand admits those cases may never come to trial.
I think that as far as our particular cases are concerned, it's going to be a very, very close decision as to whether or not they will in fact be tried.
Closing the books on the other cases would not upset Willie Mae Mathis, even though her 11-year-old son Jeffrey was not mentioned in the trial.
I don't feel satisfied that he's convicted for Jeffrey too. But they're going to tie the other ones in on him anyway. And the other parents would be satisfied too.
But not Camille Bell, who a year and a half ago first spurred police to investigate the murder pattern after her 9-year-old son Yusef was killed. She did volunteer work for the Wayne Williams defense team because she maintains he was a scapegoat.
The illusion of guilt was created. Once that was done, they left the city of Atlanta saying, well, hey, maybe he did it, left the nation saying, well, hey, maybe he did it. And we have basically and virtually backed off from doing any investigation. And from that, we have to conclude that nobody cares if children die.
Whether Camille Bell is right or wrong, it is doubtful at this point that anyone else will be arrested for any of these murders. In the words of W.K. Perry, some of these cases will be on the books when we're gone. This is Sam Ford.
The Atlanta killings had an impact on all of us. Like it or not, the headlines were all around us. The story, a recurrent nightmare on the airwaves. But we were observers, free to turn the page or change the channel. On Atlanta's South Side, there was no such choice. It was happening there. Ned Potter has the story of a community's mass tragedy and its struggle to cope with it.
Gwendolyn Coleman has been a teacher for 33 years. Try to get her to admit that she is any more careful about the children now.
Is your mother going to pick you up?
Yes.
Where is she?
We've always tried to teach our children to be very careful and particular about any strangers at any time.
I have always been concerned about the children, she says. The crisis of the murders will pass. But will things ever return to normal? Not quite.
I've had 1 or 2 children that would not even get in the car with me because they said, Mom, Daddy told me not to get in the car, even though they know me.
My little girl was scared to even get on the bus.
Mothers like Joanne Ellison feel it.
She had, thinking that maybe it might be the bus driver. She didn't want to even ride the bus anymore.
Mothers like Ella Evans feel it.
It'll always be there. Every time you see a little kid, you'll always have that. It'll never disappear completely. How can it?
Atlanta has been the hub of the South. Some say the most livable place in America, the city too busy to hate. All that, and yet in its midst was an underclass, poor blacks whose children were being murdered.
Let's look at why this case was so important. Blacks die every day. Murders are committed every day.
Dr. Charles King heads the Urban Crisis Center.
And the only reason why this case has achieved such worldwide notoriety is the fact that it almost takes 28 dead blacks to equal the kind of public outrage of the killing of one well-respected white. And young blacks today have only 3 or 4 avenues to look at: football, basketball, or entertainment. Now, I blame society because giving them this lack of vision, the lack of projection. Even Wayne Williams himself was searching for an identity.
And I've had people say to me, we were really waiting to see how long it would take for blacks and whites in Atlanta to be at each other's throats.
Tom Hamill of the Atlanta Chamber of Commerce.
But I think the real key was the fact that the black and white in this town did really come together and stay together remarkably well and collaborated.
As far as bringing people together, I disagree. As a matter of fact, things are going on as usual. The city council, for instance, just cut the budget of the recreation department, where at the time of the murders, this was the hue and cry: we need more recreation, we need more places for children to go.
The funerals are over, the searches called off, the green ribbons people wore are gone. Gwendolyn Coleman is just as careful about the children as she ever was. But will things ever return fully to normal? Not quite.
I mean, so many kids, so many little kids. It never just disappear. It never will with me, and I think any mother that loves their kid is going to always remember this sort of thing happening and that it could have happened to their kid, and it could also happen again.
This is Ned Potter.
Perhaps the terror of the Atlanta killings is that it did not have to be Atlanta. It could have happened anywhere and has happened elsewhere. Sometimes we mask the enormity of such crimes with code names. For example, in California, we call them the freeway killings. Code names to make short order sense of that which makes no sense. People who prey on the young for reasons known only to them. Yet there are reasons, not justification, but reasons. Jerry Bowen reports.
It was the summer of 1973 when the nation focused in horror on Houston and the unfolding story of a mass murderer and his teenaged accomplices. They claimed 27 victims, all teenage boys, all sexually tortured before they were murdered. Chicago and the winter of 1978. A 37-year-old contractor confessed to killing 33 young men and boys. Most were buried beneath his house. Another case of sex and murder. The worst case on record, but not the last. In Los Angeles, where major crimes earn Hollywood titles, the freeway killings began in 1978. It was a 3-year murder spree that ended with 23 known victims, mostly teenage boys whose bodies were discarded near freeways. Another case of sex, torture, and death.
The cases are chillingly similar in several respects, not the least of which the killers and their accomplices, and how little their families and friends really knew about them, or wanted to know about them.
Elmer Wayne Henley, 17 years old at the time, became the main defendant in the Houston case after he killed 33-year-old Dean Corll in self-defense. Henley was convicted for murdering 6 of the boys.
Wayne would never kill anybody.
John Wayne Gacy, convicted in the Chicago case, liked to have his picture taken with celebrities and performed as a clown at birthday parties. To his neighbors, he was Mr. Nice Guy.
A very personable person and easy to get along with.
We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant, William George Bonin, guilty of murder.
William Bonin was convicted in 10 of the freeway killer cases. Bonin had a record as a sex offender. He liked to handcuff young boys. That much his mother knew before his arrest.
he would put it on them and do his act and then let them go. He never hurt them except for the handcuffs, which is bad enough.
Investigators, however, saw a different side of the mass murderer.
He thought that maybe society owed him this type of thing. He gave me the impression that the kids were out there for his choosing, you know, for him to just pick them up and do what he wanted to do.
And the victims in Houston and Chicago and Los Angeles, for the most part, young white males. What made them vulnerable? What makes any teenager vulnerable in this society?
Adolescence is a time often when the young person, in order to deal with reality, has to rather omnipotently say, it's not going to affect me. Everybody else but not me.
I don't think in a lot of cases their parents know where they're going or know where they're at for long periods of time. If you've been out on Santa Monica Boulevard, you know that there's literally hundreds of kids out there, and I think it's kind of obvious that a lot of them are underage.
Every major city has its own Santa Monica Boulevard. It's a bustling Hollywood street, home to runaways, notorious for the young male prostitutes hustling tricks, an area where the freeway killer found at least 2 victims. But whether it's Houston, Chicago, or LA, the attitude of the young hustler is the same.
I mean, if someone is going to come across and say, okay, I want your money, I want some sex, and I'm going to kill you, and he shows me a gun or a knife or whatever, okay, then I'm going to hurt him with this, okay? I've hurt several people already. Everywhere you go, you're taking a chance. You have to take a risk with everything you do. If you want to hustle, you have to take that risk.
You don't find kids that are star athletes down here. You don't find kids that are student body presidents. It's kids with some kind of major problems that they didn't handle very well.
16-year-old Stephen Wood was not a star athlete, but he wasn't a runaway or prostitute either. He was the kid who lives next door in Anywhere, America, never gets into any real trouble, obeys his parents. But still, Stephen Wood became a victim of a mass murderer, the freeway killer, in April of 1980.
I said, Stephen, whatever you do, don't hitchhike. And he says, oh, Mom, there's a lot of weirdos out there. I'm not dumb enough to do that.
Houston, Chicago, Los Angeles, a common thread of tragedy. The story of young boys who grew up to be men, who killed young boys. A statement about American culture? Perhaps. Perhaps society failed to help the murderers and the murder victims alike in some necessary ways. Perhaps their families failed them, or they simply failed themselves. In all the cases, what can be said is that too little was known about the killers and many of their victims until it was too late. This is Jerry Bowen in Los Angeles.
This time, it happened in Atlanta. And the recently elected mayor of Atlanta, Andrew Young, was in Washington when the Williams verdict was announced this evening. Mayor Young is now in our CBS News Washington Bureau. Mayor, good evening. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much.
This vicious Dickensian world in which adults, for their own purposes, sometimes sexual, sometimes money, prey on young people who think they know more than they know. It happens in every big city, but you're the mayor of Atlanta. What are you going to do about it?
Well, basically, what we're trying to do about it is understand the life that our children live, and I think there's been a greater focus on our school system, particularly on the question of those who drop out. Many of the young people were in school, however, who were killed, and Wayne Williams himself was a very successful student through the high school years. In fact, I knew Wayne as a high school student, and it was not until late adolescence or after what seems to be failures in college that he seemed to fall apart. So it's pretty hard to know what we can do structurally in the society. Basically, we've got to make basic institutions like the family and give the kind of support that we can in a city through recreation, through basic support activities that come from the community.
But speaking of that support, Mayor, we heard earlier in this broadcast a charge that the City Council had just recently decided to reduce the amount of money it would be spending on summer recreation.
Well, one committee of the City Council did that, and I don't think that that will stand. In fact, I think some of those parks that were voted closed, we will be able to open and must open. it doesn't represent any policy on my part. It basically represents an attempt that all cities have of trying to cope with inflation and still deliver city services with less available money.
Mayor, what about the accusation made again tonight by Wayne Williams' father that this was a political trial? The federal government had hammered down hard on the authorities in Atlanta to get a man, and they got Wayne Williams.
Well, what happened, I think, was one of the fairest trials that I've ever heard of. Both the police that investigated the case and the FBI officials were both black. The judge in the case, the defense attorney team was led by a young black attorney who I think did a very good job. The jury was 8 blacks and 4 whites. Both defense and prosecution seemed to be satisfied with the jury during the 9 weeks of the trial. And Mr. and Mrs. Williams seemed to be impressed with the way the trial went and offered no complaint. I think they're obviously upset at the verdict, because it also is a verdict on them as parents. And I sympathize with them in this, but I don't think it's fair to second guess the 12 people who sat through this for 9.5 weeks and who listened to every shred of evidence and who saw the trial through from beginning to end. I think in one case, in our case in Atlanta, the newspapers, I think, bent over backwards being fair. They didn't try him in the press. If anything, they gave equal treatment and almost more headlines to defense testimony.
Thank you very much, Atlanta Mayor Andrew Young. Thank you for being with us this evening. Collectively, we knew them as victims of a child killer. The headlines about their deaths grew larger as the list of snatched and killed grew to 28. Sociologically, we knew them as the children of Atlanta's poor and black, in search of odd jobs and pocket money on the mean streets of a rundown neighborhood. There is some truth in that, but there is another truth. They lived and died one by one over a 22-month period. They were individuals, each a young life, with a name, a personality, a family circle, a circle of friends, and a neighborhood they called home. They were 28 of America's children.
Edward Smith, age 14. Alfred Evans, age 13. Milton Harvey, age 14. Yusuf Bell, age 9. Angel Lanier, age 12. Eric Middlebrooks, age 15. Aaron Weich, age 10. Anthony Carter, age 9. Clifford Jones, age 13. Charles Stevens, age 12. LaTanya Wilson, age 8. Aaron Jackson, age 9. Patrick Rogers, age 16. Christopher Richardson, age 11. Earl Terrell, age 10. Terry Pugh, age 15. Luby Jeter, age 14. Patrick Baltazar, age 11. Jeffrey Mathis, age 11. Curtis Walker, age 13. Timothy Hill, age 13. Eddie Duncan, age 21. Larry Rogers, age 21. Joseph Bell, age 15. Michael McIntosh, age 23. Jimmy Ray Payne, age 21. William Barrett, age 17. Nathaniel Cater, age 27.
No headline, no verdict can help us fully fathom why they died, nor can any headline or verdict convey the pain of parents who have lived to bury their slain children. The rest of us are left with a verdict in Atlanta, with 28 children who came to symbolize one city's fear and every parent's nightmare. For CBS News, Dan Rather, good night.
This has been a CBS News special report. Verdict in Atlanta.